Radicalization to violence is when somebody believes so strongly in a social or justice issue and the ideology associated with that the only way they can achieve success is through violence, through that radicalization process that takes place. They feel that they're at the end of their rope. The only thing they can do now to make their point, to achieve the ideology connected to their social justice issue, is through some form of violence. And there are many forms of violence that can take place, and that's what we're trying to prevent here in the city of Denver.
We have had multiple types and examples of radical extremism, everything from anarchists to white supremacists to militias, animal rights and environmental rights activists that have taken those steps and moved from radicalization to what we call mobilization. And that's when that ideology now becomes a violent act or a criminal act where now law enforcement is involved.
So what we're talking about is individuals taking very extreme forms of ideologies that they carry to the point where they feel that they need to enact this type of violence to carry out that set of ideology. And at that point that they start to mobilize, that's where a question of public safety really comes into play.
What we don't want to do is give the impression that radicalization only exists in particular communities. What we want to make sure is that people know that radicalization or extremism happens when people are outside of a system, when they're outside of a community, when they're not enveloped, and they don't have pathways to help.
We need to build trusting relationships within our community. Before we even talk about countering violent extremism, we have to go into communities that we may not have had working relationships before and make sure that they have our trust and that we have a good relationship with them, and then introduce, okay, we're going to talk about terrorism prevention and we're going to talk about countering violent extremism and what resources you have within your community to get the help an individual may need.
What we're doing right now in the city of Denver, we're conducting officer training. We're training about 250 of our patrol officers on what violent extremism is, what it looks like, and steps they can take when they're in the community to off-ramp that kind of violence if they come across it, or somebody that might be heading down that road that could turn into violence.
Off-ramping is probably one of the most important tools we have at our disposal to prevent an incident from occurring. From somebody taking that step from radicalization, which is the thought process, to mobilization, which is acting upon those thoughts.
The other aspect is what we call the community awareness briefing. We have a group of community resource officers who have been trained. They go into the community and they train community members on what violent extremism is and what that looks like. And they just are more or less starting the conversation in the community to let people know what it could look like, what it could turn into if it went unchecked.
That is more of an organized event where people throughout the community can come and we can specifically talk about what radicalization is and also the resources that we have here in Colorado and in the Denver area to be able to intervene before somebody takes radicalization and moves it into mobilization. At both the law enforcement awareness briefing, what we call as the lab, and the community awareness briefing, what we refer to as the CAB, are data-driven.
Because when we talk about different violent extremist acts that have happened in the United States, almost someone knew something, they just didn't know who to report to or they didn't feel comfortable in reporting. And our hope is to eliminate that barrier that folks might experience with that.
The third component of our grant is Newcomer academies. We have a significant immigrant and refugee population here in the city of Denver, and we're going to appeal to those folks. We are reaching out to them and welcoming them to the city and letting them know about the many city services that we offer, but we're also letting them know that there is violent extremism that takes place in every community, and we want them to be mindful of what it might look like in their community, and certainly we don't want them to become victims of that themselves. So there's some education in that component as well.
We're really striving to have more officers have those positive first contacts with adults, with youth, before there's any sort of incident happens. That builds a lot of trust, it builds bridges, and so if there are public safety concerns, if there are concerns about communities being targeted by outside extremist groups or anyone needing extra support services, folks know they have a resource. Folks know they have a friend in DPD that they can go to and share those concerns. So overall, it enhances all of our public safety.
The other component of our grant is a mentorship program through our Denver Public Schools.
I think youth are targeted for a lot of different reasons. The first and foremost is I know that at the high school level, our kids here, and I'm assuming kids everywhere, they want to be part of something bigger. I think that there are organizations and groups out there that will easily manipulate younger minds to feel like they're part of something bigger. And we need to make sure that the part of the bigger collective that the kids get involved in is all for good. The mentoring program through the Denver Police Department has been incredible. It has allowed our students through an 8th grade social studies class to engage directly with the community work that our police department is doing.
And the last part of our grant, which is one of the most important parts, is significant community outreach. Here in the city of Denver, we have hired 2 civilians that are assisting us with the implementation and the design of our violent extremism grant. And one of the things they're really helping with is outreach in all of our diverse communities.
The underlying goal of this whole program is to have a stronger relationship between the communities that reside within the city and county of Denver with the Denver Police Department, because our entire goal is to prevent violent extremism within our community, and we want to help communities protect themselves from violent extremists as well.
We need to be the resources. We need to share what we have with the community so that if they see someone radicalizing, they know that they can call the Colorado Resilience Collaborative. They know that they can call their friends at DPD, and we together as a community will prevent violent acts from happening in Denver.
Law enforcement has had its ups and downs over the last several years, and it's been a challenge for every major law enforcement agency to develop positive connections in the communities. But I can tell you, for me, this has been the most rewarding aspect of my career.